I know a little secret about Tony's reviews, and he didn't want me to make this video, but I finally talked him into it because while Tony is pixel peeping and doing autofocus tests and looking side by side at the details of the latest and greatest gear, his favorite camera is the Leica M10D. And he manually focuses it. And the LCD resolution on the back isn't just low, there's no LCD screen. This is what he shoots with all of the time. Tony, I am definitely gonna discuss this choice with you because I think it's gonna help people understand our reviews better. But I also want to talk about how and why we make our reviews so that people understand. I want you to understand how to choose your favorite camera based on them, because obviously we're reviewing the latest and the greatest gear, but then our favorite cameras are like this.
Well, Leica understands that photography is more than just the results. It can be about the experience and the presentation and the reputation, and Squarespace understands that too. Squarespace is the best way to present your work, whether stills or video. No matter what your style is, Squarespace has templates that professional designers have created that will match that style and that you can customize to make them your own. That's why Squarespace is where Chelsea and I both host our portfolios. Right now, go to squarespace.com/Chelsea, and that sets you up with a completely free trial, no credit card required, and just see how you like it. And if you love it, use the coupon code Chelsea and get 10% off. Spell your name, Chelsea.
Chelsea. All right, let's get right into this because I want to talk about how we review cameras before we talk about why this is your camera of choice.
I can't take my hands off it. I just love holding it. It feels so good in my hands.
I know you do, but I feel like there's some misconceptions. We review new gear, and a lot of the time people misconstrue that as us saying you need to buy all the new gear, and that's absolutely not true. New things come out, and we just want to see what the new technology is, and also that's what people are interested in. We absolutely understand that you can take good pictures with old gear.
Because we're old, right? We've been at this for a while. You're not this old, but I'm 49 years old. I've been doing photography for 27 years. I started on film, and I took pictures that I like, and I loved the process, and I worked my way up from the very first digital cameras to where we are today. I don't think that you need a Sony A1 to take every picture, of course, because I've been there through this entire evolution of camera gear.
You still have portfolio pictures of wildlife from your Canon
5D Mark I.
Mark I, yeah.
The original one, because it did good.
Well, that's just a misconception I'm clearing up, because a lot of the times our comments are like, you don't need all that new stuff. We totally agree, but it's just a new camera review, and that's just a part of it. The other thing is that when we're doing a review, we test what they market, and this can also lead to confusion. So if they market that they have the best resolution of all cameras, we test the resolution and see if it's the sharpest camera. Or if they say they have the fastest camera and it gets like 30 frames per second, we're gonna test that and see if that claim is true and if it's applicable to you. So oftentimes people will say like, well, why are you weighting that so heavily? Why do you care? It's like, it's not that we care. They're telling you you should care about that. We're gonna tell you if that's true or if it's what you expect or if it's gonna function properly.
Yeah, people who've read our photography book, Stunning Digital Photography, know this. Like, we don't even cover camera settings until chapter 4. The first 3 chapters are things like storytelling and composition and lighting. Things that are completely independent. You can use them with a drone or a smartphone or a film camera, because that is the essence of photography. Those are the most important things. But in the context of a camera review, you review the camera gear.
Well, yeah, it's a whole different thing. And I love it. I think it's fun to look at the specs and look at it as a piece of technology and kind of pick it apart with tests.
Yeah.
But I think that does get confusing for people.
Yeah, they stumble across a video of ours and we're just reviewing a camera, but that might be their introduction to us. They don't know, they haven't read our photography book or watched the training or watched 10 years of YouTube videos. Without context, they think all we care about is this new gear, but it could not be further from the truth.
So people, you should keep that in mind when you watch them, because it's just seeing if the gear works as advertised. And speaking of that, we also compare, which a lot of people don't do. Oftentimes you'll see a review of anything and it's not compared to anything else. It's just reviewed in a vacuum. And we don't like to do that. If there's a camera that's coming out, it's brand new, we like to compare it to something similar and see if it's a good value or if it functions as well as its competitor. And that's
I get this from camera reviewers because we, like when the Z9 came out, we compared it to the Canon R3 and the Sony Alpha 1, the closest competitors at the time. But that required us to have something like $25,000, $30,000 in gear with lenses and everything. And that's not something most camera reviewers can do. They're lucky to get their hands on a Z9. So they just sort of review it in a vacuum and they test it and like, wow, this is great.
Could it also just be because it's a massive pain in the butt because that review took forever because you have to go through the results of multiple cameras and do multiple shoots?
Yeah, exactly. Multiple different scenarios with multiple different photographers. And when things don't work, then you go back to the camera company and you try to resolve it. And you do that times 3 with 3 different, it gets exponentially more difficult, which is why other people don't do that. But then people see our review and we compare Sony versus Canon and we like the Sony better or we like the Canon better. And
we hurt feelings.
It hurts feelings, yeah.
But the thing is, like, for the Z9 review, for example, we compared that to the R5. Wait, was it the R5 or the R3 did we compare it to?
Both at different times.
The Z9 did not perform as well, and I think that was interpreted as like, all right, throw away your camera or never get it. But that's never the point. It's like, this is how these 3 function compared to each other. Just make your choice.
It's like the Olympics. Like you hand out a gold, a silver, and a bronze, but you're not like, oh, the silver must have sucked.
Yeah, you don't take the...
why do they hate the silver medalist? No, that person's like the second best on the planet.
Yeah, that's true.
You still respect silver and bronze, but the gold was a little bit better.
Yeah, I like that analogy. No one just throws the bronze competitor in the garbage.
Yeah.
I want to talk about another part of our test, which is that we do a lot of them in controlled settings, and that's really fun for us. We like to make things slightly scientific without being like completely in a lab, obviously, but we do a lot of things that are consistent for a reason. So we have specific places that we take cameras where we know we have controlled lighting or a controlled distance. One of them is our hallway from our back hall to our kitchen, and it goes from a place that's not well lit to a place that is well lit. You can test the autofocus as I walk towards you. And sometimes people comment that it's boring. You're absolutely right. That's boring.
It's boring for us too.
The pictures are ugly. We get that. But if we were to take pictures in different locations all of the time, it would be more difficult for us to get a feel for how it performs compared to other cameras we use. So it's a way that we introduce some consistency for us as well, so that, all right, the pictures are ugly, but how did it work compared to last time?
I also think if I were to go out and take some beautiful portfolio picture, I would not want to do that trip with some piece of gear that I was testing.
Yeah.
So people complain that our wildlife pictures when we're testing something are boring. But if I were to go through the trouble to, you know, travel across the country and get a bald eagle pulling a fish out of the water, I would not do that with the new Sigma lens that I was testing because I wouldn't know how it was performing. I would want to use the gear that I know and love. So when we are taking good pictures, we're doing it with older gear.
The gear that we know.
The gear that we know, not the new gear. When we do the new gear, you're going to get test shots because we don't yet know how it works. That's how our tests started. Yeah. I remember when we first bought the 5D Mark II, one of our first camera reviews was, I need to go through and figure out what this thing does well and what it does not do well, because we were doing stock photography and I didn't want to do a whole photo shoot with a camera that didn't work properly. So I just recorded my usual getting to know this camera kind of test, and that's what our camera reviews came from.
And then we also throw in a real world test because sometimes we know that in those lab controlled settings that the differences are negligible and might not even show in the real world when there's other variables to mess it up. So for example, sharpness of a long lens, you might see it if you're testing it in a controlled environment, but when you get outside and there's moisture in the air and there's backlighting and there's dust, that you just might not even see the difference.
Yeah, and I will say when we get a new piece of gear, and we often spend a lot of time with it off camera.
Yeah.
If we get a new lens, I'll put it on my camera, and then as I'm doing normal shoots, I will shoot with that lens. And I get experience with it, but you don't see that. So people think everything they see in the review is all the testing that we did. But really there's often weeks of testing that lead up to that. And then when we record the review, we try to capture all of our real world experience, but we can't show it because in the real world, you don't have somebody with a camera filming you all the time.
Yeah, so we'll shoot for weeks, or sometimes we'll have a camera for even longer.
Yeah.
And then we kind of replicate the test that we already did. So sometimes you have to shoot for a while to realize, oh, the tracking is not working right. And then we have to try to replicate it on camera just to show you for an example. I mean, we could say this happened, but we try to demonstrate things and recreate.
Yeah, but then people get sucked into like nitpicking the example that we showed, even though it was just an example meant to illustrate this thing that we learned in the real world.
Yeah, it can be difficult. The testing process is pretty tricky. This one's tricky for me. A lot of people think that if we test a feature or a camera and it doesn't perform extremely well, that means we don't like the entire brand. And that's happened before, where I know specifically with Fuji, people have said we hate Fuji, but you shot with Fuji. We have your last camera. This was your old favorite camera.
You can tell my actual favorite cameras because I always put leather cases on them, and this is my XT3, and I had a case for my XT4 as well, and my X Pro 3 because they were my daily cameras for a long time.
Yeah, but we did a Fuji review and we said that it didn't do wildlife well, and then a lot of people thought that meant we hated Fuji or that we wouldn't use Fuji while you were actively shooting with Fuji all of the time.
Yeah, but technically it's just not the best. It's just not.
I mean, if
people don't like to hear that, but I like the experience of Fuji. There are a lot of things I love about Fuji, and that's kind of what we're getting at. Like, it doesn't have to excel at everything for us to like it, because we're not one camera people. We're multiple camera people. We use different cameras for different things. While we're on the topic, Miss switching camera brands every 3 months, I'm switching from Sony to Canon.
Yeah.
This is the camera that you have around your neck whenever we're out. It is the Fuji X100V, and it does not even have an interchangeable lens on it. It's a little APS-C sensor, and it's a little tiny thing here, and you love it.
Yeah, I do. I like the experience. I think for a lot of the same reasons you like your Leica. It is about the experience for me. I don't even share these pictures publicly, but they're some of my favorite, and I just share them privately on my social media that I just have a few friends on. And
so you're saying that's better than a Nikon Z9? Is that what you're saying?
I enjoy this more. I'm not going to say it's better.
Yeah, I mean, if you're walking through town and you have something slung around your neck, I'd rather have that than a Nikon Z9. But if I were doing wildlife photography, I would pick up the Z9.
So I bring all of this up because when you understand that our reviews are from a strictly technical point and we're not emotional about them at all, we have no emotional attachment to brands.
I do not have feelings for big multi-billion-dollar multinational corporations. I just don't.
But people do, because, and this is hard for us to understand, honestly, because we are forced to use new cameras all the time. I understand what it's like to own something for a long time and have an attachment to that thing. I can feel that way about other things in my life. But cameras, when you're getting a new one all the time, and that's the reason I switch cameras all the time for reviews, is so that I don't grow attached to one brand. I want to be completely unbiased and experienced in all brands, but you just don't end up attached to anything. You just don't care. Everyone thinks that we're like Sony or Canon fanboys, and we shoot Leica and Fuji and Sony and Canon. So
yeah, no sponsorships, but no feelings.
So I want to talk about why you do like that Leica.
Okay.
But then I also want to talk about how I think that's going to impact all of you at home, because you might be thinking like, who cares? But I think that once you understand our thought process, it's going to better help you choose the camera that's right for you, rather than getting bogged down in all of like the specs and performance tests that you see every time you look up a camera, because they throw a lot of numbers at you. If it's not us, it's any website you look up where it just gives you a chart of specs and maximum ISO and minimum ISO. Like, you need to know all that stuff, but you also need to know what's important to you. So before we do that, let's talk about Squarespace, because no matter what camera you're shooting with, you need a good place to put your photos to make them look good and neat and clean and professional. And that's Squarespace. You can drag and drop them in. It's that easy to do. They have professionally designed templates that are great. You can sell prints on there. I just sold a print from my Squarespace website.
Yeah, good work. You're a professional photographer.
You can book clients. You can put photos up there so that your clients can pick which photos they like. It's super easy to do, and I enjoy mine a lot. Try a free trial. There's no credit card needed. You don't have to remember to cancel. There's nothing to lose. Just try it at squarespace.com/Chelsea and use the coupon code Chelsea to get 10% off when you decide to buy it, because I think you will. That's CHELSEA. So let's get into why you like your Leica, because I kind of want to know too, why'd you gravitate towards that?
This is just such a ridiculous camera. Like, the entire back is completely blank except for a big exposure compensation dial,
I like
which,
that. That's what
and I have to keep it at like -1 or so because it doesn't have smart auto exposure. Like it won't find the face and it'll just overexpose the face
okay.
because it just uses center weighted
But
averaging.
you know it. You figured it out.
Yeah. And then it's on the top here, it's got like a fake film advance lever.
Yeah, is that just for fun?
It's just for fun. I just like put my thumb there and sometimes I fiddle it back and forth and I like that. And the shutter button like screws in like an old timey, but you could replace this with something cool if you wanted to. And then it's got analog controls for the shutter speed and the ISO. I pretty much leave those on auto because
So
I
you
just do
like
aperture priority.
you like the tactile experience, like the construction.
Yeah, and I like the optical viewfinder. Like there's no display on it. There's a couple of numbers that show up on underneath, but it's an old-timey like 1980s LCD display and it's not an SLR, so I'm looking through a separate lens and I can see the lens here, which is why the lens hood has to have a little hole in it because you have to look through it to see what's going
You
on.
like the quirks.
I like the little quirks of it. It just feels so old-timey. I just have to, and I have to like dial in the distance roughly on the lens and then fine tune it once I get it in because it has a split prism focusing system. I like all that about it. And I like that I don't look like a tourist. And if I have a Canon R5 around my neck, people think I'm a tourist. And if I have this Leica around my neck, they think I'm a photographer.
And I want to know about your choice to have no LCD screen, because that's a bold choice.
Well, because I'm kind of a perfectionist and I chimp. When I take a picture with my A1, I look at it and I start to nitpick for imperfections. And then I reshoot to remove those imperfections and I repeat that process. And if you're a professional commercial photographer, that's a really important process. But when I'm taking pictures for fun, it bogs me down, especially if I'm taking a picture of you and I want it to be a nice portrait. Then I'm like, wait, could you move over here? The light can be better. I want to just, with this, I take a picture and I move on because I cannot review it. Even in the viewfinder, it's not what you see is what you get. I have no idea. There's little lines that show up for the framing, but none of them are quite exact because of parallax and all this. So I dial it in approximately and then I move on with my life.
So this is more about the experience for you. You want to enjoy the process and not stress about the results.
Yeah, exactly. And I often don't see the results for months. It's more like shooting film. I have a 128 gig card in here and I shoot JPEG on it. And then every couple of months I pop the card out and I import it and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that trip from months ago. It's a different experience than it's a different experience than when I shoot my A1 for work.
I like it. So that's like, you had to know things about yourself to choose something that you knew would be enjoyable, which is that, well, you like the legacy of Leica as well.
Well, right. Like the Lights Freedom Train, like during World War II, they were forced into labor by the Nazis, but they were sneaking out the Jewish captives and to safety. And like they have so much history through Leica that I really appreciate. And this camera has not changed much. Like it's still hand built in Germany and the design has not really changed. And I like that about it. I am holding history and doing something very similar to what I could have been doing 50 years ago.
I like my camera for similar reasons, the Fuji X100V. Very similar things actually, Tony. Mine's a very tactile experience. I have the aperture ring on the lens. I often feel like stressed about which lenses to bring with me. And sometimes I end up not bringing anything at all because then I'm like, well, I should bring this one, but that one's sharper, but I don't want to really carry something around that's heavy because we're just going around town and I probably won't see something. This is just easy for me to grab and I don't have to stress about it. And then all these little tactile wheels and it looks cool and it's fun and I like the built-in little presets. I know that's kind of corny, but I shoot in black and white.
Yeah,
and
the film simulation.
Yeah, it makes me see differently and it kind of inspires me a little bit to look through and see the world in black and white and then suddenly I'm looking at form and light versus colors. So that's why I chose this. And listen, I shoot with the Sony Alpha 1 too, and that's like the latest, the greatest, high resolution, like the best autofocusing for wildlife. I use that for wildlife and I use this when I'm having fun. And I think that I wanted to bring up these points because people often feel pressured to want to get the latest and the greatest and the most expensive stuff. And I get your emails, and I always feel really guilty because you'll come to me and be like, I only have X amount of dollars, but you said this camera is so good. And I need you to understand that it might not be for you. And I really just want you to find the camera that works for you. So taking what we've talked about with our favorite cameras, despite reviewing the latest and the greatest stuff, I want you to consider how this impacts you and what you should know about yourself when you're picking a camera. And I think one of the things is how you shoot. Are you like Tony, where you don't want to chimp and you want to enjoy the moment? Or do you actually get the most joy from chimping and being a perfectionist and shooting and reshooting? Just think about what you enjoy, and don't let the marketing of camera companies dictate what you think you should be shooting with.
And you don't have to be one person all the time. I
Yeah.
use a different camera when I'm shooting wildlife or professionally versus just for fun. And I'm different than I was when we started this channel 10 years ago. I was much more like technical, results oriented. And I have since really learned to appreciate the process of taking pictures and then not even necessarily looking at the pictures. That's how much I like the process of taking the pictures.
Listen, I agree with you. I think when I was a beginner, I liked really glam pictures, like perfect. Well, HDR was in style at kind of like in 2012 when we started doing a lot of this. And as I've gotten older and as I've gotten more experience, I just keep getting more and more simple. And I don't actually share a lot of that photography because we do have such a technical audience. When I do, they're like, oh, well, it's not sharp or it's not level. And
Like, no.
I feel
Have you seen my camera? Of course not. It's super old and crappy.
Well, they haven't seen your camera.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to make this, because there's a difference between trying to get the sharpest, maybe most professional pictures and just enjoying the process. And I keep those to myself. I mostly keep this camera to myself. I made a review. I keep the pictures to myself, but that's when I'm feeling the most joy, and I want that for you. So think about what you're enjoying. Is it contemplative? Is it when you slow down? Is it, you might love pixel peeping. There are technical people who will take pictures of their family and then zoom in on the eye and love that they get all this detail. That's okay too. You're allowed to just buy stuff and nerd out over the specs and the tech. That's totally okay, as long as that's what you like. And then also, of course, if you just like the results, that's fine. And we have people come to us all the time and say, and our neighbors or our friends, and say, what camera should I get? I have this old one. Should I upgrade? And we'll tell them, like, if you like the results and you like how it works, like, you don't have to get new stuff.
Yeah.
You can just stick with what you have if you like it. So that's kind of my point. We are Tony and Chelsea as reviewers. And I feel like we get judged a lot for that, but we're also Tony and Chelsea as photographers, and no one really wants to click on that, but this is what we're shooting with. We enjoy the process, and we want you to as well. And I'd like to hear what you're all shooting with, what your favorite cameras are, why you shoot, how you like to shoot.
What unconventional things do you appreciate that other people wouldn't understand? Like, what irrational things do you like?
I like people that like vintage glass that isn't perfect.
I like
it just
that
has
too.
character.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate other photographers that shoot what they know. So I have some friends that are also photographers that shoot like cars that they like or places that they enjoy. And they're more simple shots. I don't think they have mass appeal, but I actually think they're way more beautiful. So I'm just curious to see.
Don't forget to check out our sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace.com/Chelsea. It gets you started with a totally free trial on your website so you can see how it works. Set up a store, take appointments from clients, view detailed analytics so you can see exactly who's checking you out. Use your social media to funnel people to your proper website, because social media doesn't care if you make money. They want to make money.
Yeah.
Your website is where you actually can capitalize on this, build a relationship with your clients. After your free trial, when you love it, the coupon code Chelsea will get you 10% off. That's CHELSEA. Thank you, Squarespace.
Thanks, and don't forget to subscribe to our Picture This Photography podcast. You can get that anywhere podcasts are available, or you can just do it here on YouTube and watch the video version. Thanks so much.